What's up, friends? Another late start. Welcome back to the build. Late start here because Rex starts night shift in like tomorrow night. So he's sort of trying to get in the swing of it. So letting Rex sleep for pretty much all morning.
No.
That's alright. But that's alright because we just work. We just do that and then work late into the night or work late into the night with Rex. So yeah, back on the 31 as you saw last episode, which was last night. I started sorting out this loom. Got most of it stripped out. After I signed off the last episode, I continued on with just extending my TPS. So I used some of the old wiring, which is a lot of the reason I really wanted to strip a lot of it out because we're going to use a lot of it, to extend my my TPS. That should be long enough. And I pretty much got this all down to all the parts that need to be spliced into the Microtech, which I have started. So what I plan on doing is soldering all these joins, but if there's one thing I've learnt with doing wiring in cars, it's to not get too ahead of yourself as far as actually sealing them up, heat shrinking them and that, until you can pretty much confirm that they're correct, because it's a real pain in the ass to have to undo all your work just to do that. So solder them up just to make sure the connection's good, slide the heat shrink over them, but I'm not going to heat shrink them yet in case they're not correct. But pretty much this is pretty well sorted. Pretty much just got to join all these, which is not that hard. There is a ignition that comes from this plug here, which from under the dash, it's from last night, which will be ignition to the ECU on. For the constant power to the ECU, I'm just going to run a new wire from the battery, just because then I can put my own inline fuse in it. And then for the fuel pump, I have to wire in a fuel pump relay. So the R31s, I think maybe the VLs, I don't know, they're like a modulated pulse width, negatively switched fuel pump through the ECU usually. So the ECU controls the fuel pump flow essentially. But obviously when you go to like a aftermarket computer, those don't do that, so it's just a negatively switched relay. So got to wire in a relay, which is going to be fine. Pretty much just going to put the relay up in this corner in the engine bay here, so it's easy to get at. And that way I'll just run the trigger wire from the ECU just along the loom, along the firewall, and then it'll just break out of the loom there and just go along to the relay. The other thing is, I have had a few people ask me about the Defi Advanced ZD copy thing, just because they are really handy. The one we've got in the Cruiser is really good, so I'm going to try and make sure that I document the install of that fairly well, because I've had a few questions about it. So the issue I've had with this, mine and the one in the Cruiser are actually different. The one in the Cruiser came in like a orangey box, and the actual control box where everything plugs in is a lot bigger than this one. And also all of the pressure wires were a lot longer. So as you can see, these wires are quite short. I had planned to put this box in the glove box with the ECU and run all of the sensor wires back to the same spot, pretty much alongside the engine loom. But that's not going to work because none of the wires for the pressure sensors are long enough. So I've decided, instead of lengthening all those, because that would be a real prick of a job, what I'm going to do is actually situate this box, which takes all the sensors, in the engine bay. I'm going to leave it in the bay. So that's going to go in this little nickel thing with the fuel pump relay as well, because the actual wire, this is what connects the actual unit on the dash to that control box, and it's quite long, so I'll be able to run that through the firewall to the box there in the bay and leave the box in the bay. That way I don't have to lengthen all those sensor wires, because that was going to be a real prick of a job. So that's pretty much what I plan on doing there. Hopefully that works out pretty well. The other advantage of that is when I want to take the motor out, I can just unplug the box from that wire and just lay it onto the motor, and it can all come out together. So that'll make it pretty easy. But anyway, that's where I'm at the moment. Yeah, wiring, man. It's just tedious. It's hard to get your head wrapped around how much needs to happen, because there's so many little things you got to do. But pretty much first thing I'm going to do at the moment is get this fuel rail off, sort out my fuel issues, get these injectors sealing properly. I'm going to put 14mm O-ring in the top of the injector so that it actually fits the rail without the little adapter, and then I've got to shorten the feet on the rail so that they actually clamp down into the manifold properly. once that's done and that's back on, that's the fuel system complete, which means I can then lay my loom down in the motor, have it going to everywhere it needs to go. Essentially, more or less, pretty much install the loom. That way I've got all the right distances and I can actually start working my way back and taping it up with loom tape and really tidying up. Yeah, that's pretty much where I'm going with it. So I plan on running my new constant from battery here, as well as the constant for the fuel pump relay, pretty much up to that corner. That's where I'm going to keep the relay, also the fuse for my battery power to the ECU, which both of them wires will just run along the firewall and then join into the loom there and go into where they are in the glove box. That's the plan. Righto, so got the feet on the rail all shortened up just a couple of mil, just ground and filed them down. So hopefully that gets me out of trouble. Also took the 11mm seals off the injectors and put on some brand spanking new 14mm seals, and took all these little adapters out of the rail. So hopefully this all put together should mean that should hopefully seal nice and well, and hopefully this fixes and completes my fuel system. I freaking hope so, because it's actually a real pain in the ass to get that rail on and off. So that seems to have mostly fixed the issue. The injectors now don't move around nearly as much as they did. They still turn a little bit, but it's just going to be one of those things of sort of start it up and see if it leaks at this point, because there's not much else I can do with it. This fitting as well is a bit how you going, but it seals the inside of the hose to the barb on the inside of that, so I'm hoping that doesn't mean anything. But yeah, it's just going to be wait and see. So anyway, that's what's going on there. Apart from that, I've started pretty much attacking this loom some more. I was trying to look up how the cam angle sensor is wired online, looking at some diagrams and stuff, and what I've pretty much found a rough guide of how it works, and going off what I've got left in my old loom, I can sort of make it work. But I found that this cam angle sensor plug, wherever I put it, I don't even know where it went now, but it's definitely been butchered before. It's been messed with before. One of the pins was in upside down. It's been joined with different color wires, so at this point it's just a matter of pick pins in the cam angle sensor plug. I will try. Here it is here. So that's all been joined together, and it's all a bit how you going. So I'm not going to do too much to it. I'm just going to pretty much put the pins back in the right way around and make sure it's all insulated and taped up properly and shielded. And then I'm just going to pick the pins and match them to the right corresponding wires on the Microtech. And hopefully that works all out pretty well. So wiring, it just takes ages, but it's one of those things that once it's done, it's definitely a lot better when you've taken the time to do it. So I'm going to keep persisting with it, but yeah, certainly not happening as fast as I expected or wanted it to. But it's one of those things you got to do it right, otherwise it'll plague you forever. And the last thing you want is wiring gremlins, because everyone hates those. So even this here, the pin out plug for the Microtech, it's just my old one. It's got up this exposed bit of wire there, because there's not much room on it. There's not a lot I can do, so just going to chuck some more solder on it where it's nice and like real thin. Tape up that individual wire with some 33, and then I've got some rubber amalgamating tape, some Scotch 23, this stuff here. So this is rubber tape, and it pretty much seals to itself and creates one big sort of seal. So once I've taped that individual wire, I'll run some of this up it to make sure it's all nice and shielded and properly insulated, and sort of hopefully tidy that up a bit. And then I've just got this has still got the wires off the my old loom, so using those I can sort of figure out which colors of the standard loom are meant to go to which pin, so I can hopefully keep that mostly stock, just in the interest of if I ever sell this setup, like this ECU and loom or the car, whoever gets it next, at least it'll be sort of easy to follow. If you just go changing all the pins around with different colors, then it just makes it nearly impossible to follow. So that's what I'm trying to do. But yeah, this loom might take a while, but at least when it's done, I'll know everything in the loom. So if something goes wrong, I'll sort of know where I can start looking for wrong things. So this is a little what I was talking about in the last episode. This is just a little packet of all different size pre-cut individual little heat shrinks, which I got from Wish for pretty much nothing. So they're pretty handy. They just save a fair bit of time and make everything neat. As you can see, I've used them to extend my TPS, which is this one here. So I used them on that. Just makes everything nice and tidy. So yeah, pretty cool little things. So we are getting ever closer. This is me fixed up little CAS unit plug thing for the Microtech. So yeah, that's what it looks like when it's all done. Under that is like rubber amalgamating tape, so it should be pretty well insulated, which will be good. I've soldered it to its corresponding wires from the CAS. I've soldered just about everything that I had twitched together. I've soldered everything. Now I know generally with like car looms, most auto eleckies that specialize in looms will not use solder. A lot of people don't like it just because it makes the connections brittle. Solder is brittle, it breaks, it cracks, it does that sort of thing. But I'd rather use solder than the cheap connections I have. Most people that actually build looms have some really nice sort of like proper aerospace freaking connectors that are really nice. But obviously I don't have that sort of thing, so that's why I'm using solder. I feel like even though it's brittle, it's going to be better than cheap ass crimps. So everything's soldered together. As I was saying, I normally wouldn't heat shrink anything until I know it all works. But because I've got to try and drag this through all the holes in the firewall and in the dash and all that sort of thing, I'm actually thinking about not taking my own advice and heat shrinking all the connections. That way it makes it easy to follow what I've done and what I haven't done as well. So yeah, I'm probably going to live to regret this, and I'm probably going to have to sit down and edit this and listen to me saying this while I'm thinking about how I shouldn't have heat shrunk everything because something didn't work. But I'm going to go ahead and heat shrink it anyway. So pretty much all that's left is injectors. Now, so this red wire is power to the injectors, which obviously does not come from the ECU anymore. So what I'm thinking is, because I was going to take power from the ECU before it breaks out on the firewall, which is going to be back here, what I'm thinking is I'll trace this power back to where it breaks out here, join my new power into it and run it back to the fuse, and that way that will power the injectors, and I'll also use this as the main battery connection for my ECU. So that way I don't have to run a new cable or a new wire the whole way through, and splicing power into that one back up here before it breaks out, yeah, it means that the injectors get power from there, also the ECU gets power, and also off that same one I'm going to run power for my Defi Advanced. So all three of those things are going to be run off the same fuse. So that makes things fairly simple. So that's what I'm looking to do there. So pretty much all I've got left to do now with this is I'm going to heat shrink this and then sort of tidy it up a little bit before I attack this injector plug. And then I have to group my injectors, and yeah, I'll use that as power. And after that, it's getting pretty close to being the loom pretty much being done. Then it's time to lay it into the car. Yeah, this CAS plug, I'm just going to re-tape over all these wires because they're a bit average, but how you going? I'm not going to re-terminate just because I don't really have the extra pins or anything here. So that's what I plan on, pretty much what I plan on doing with that. So this camera's a real pain to focus, but so yeah, I'll tape them up so they're nice and good again. I'll do the same thing where I'll use that amalgamating tape back down and then tape it all back up together, and that should hopefully be okay. But yeah, so hopefully this is all good. I'm a bit worried about why someone's done this, about whether there was potentially an issue with the CAS. I'm hoping it may have been someone just wanted to put a new plug on it and didn't want to re-terminate these into the pins. I'm not quite sure. I don't know. One of those things with using looms. So I just had a bit of a kerfuffle with this wiring, which I thought I would explain to you guys, hopefully save you the headache that we just sort of went through. So what I've been doing with this is Microtech's got obviously a wiring diagram. Tells you which injectors to batch because it's batch fired, because the Microtech LT8 only has like 4 injector outputs. You only use 2, 3 and 4. So you only use 3 outputs, so you batch fire your injectors. So they batched in 2s. So what I have done is I'd left the injector plug off the original RB30 ECU. I've got a wiring diagram for the RB30. I'll get that to hopefully focus. This camera's really annoying me with that. So I've got this wiring diagram for the RB30 injector plug, and as you can see there on the bottom, it basically says that injectors 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6 from left to right on the plug in the pinouts. So I thought, easy as, left to right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and all I did was check the Microtech batch, which batches for output number 2, batches 1 and 5. I cut out 1 and 5, or what would have been 1 and 5 on the plug to batch them together. But then when I actually traced these two wires, which were meant to be 1 and 5, back to their injector plugs, they came back at 1 and 2. So, which is actually, because I've got my old loom here, and this is exactly what, obviously whoever made this loom did the exact same thing I was doing, and just got the pinouts on the plug, cut them out and grouped them together. Which is why when me and Rex were checking this loom, we couldn't figure out why these were batched the way they were batched, because they were batched, when we tracked them back to the injector outs, they were batched actually not correct according to the Microtech diagram. So instead of being 1, 5, 3 and 6 and 2 and 4, which is how they're batched, they were 1 and 2, 3 and 4 and 5 and 6, which is just not the correct way to batch them as far as the Microtech diagram. So what we actually worked out, check the firing order of the RB30, which is 1, 5, 3, 6, 2, 4, which makes sense as to why they're batched 1, 5, 3, 6, 2 and 4. And what the problem or the correlation or the mix-up is that pinout diagram that I have for the RB30 injector plug, which labels these as from left to right 1 to 6 injectors, is not correct. That's left to right 1 to 6 in the firing order. So these injectors are actually 1, 5, 3, 6, 2 and 4. And that's why when I cut out 1 and 5, or what was meant to be 1 and 5, it was actually 1 and 2. So I've just written up on this box so it's easy to follow the firing order of an RB30. And that way, that is what these injector outputs actually are, is that from left to right. 1, 5, 3, 6, 2, 4. So that yeah, that injector plug pin output diagram that I got offline is not entirely correct. It's 1 through to 6 is actually in the firing order, not just straight up injectors 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that racked my brain a bit, but glad I got to the bottom of that. And so yeah, lucky I hadn't sold it or done anything yet. So anyway, now that I know that, just a matter of continuing where I was. Just thought I'd let you guys know that issue that I just had in case anyone has the same issue. Hopefully save you the headache. So there you have it. That's my injectors all soldered and batched in the correct batches. Actually, after doing some more digging, just putting them together then, they actually, even that plug, I was wrong. It's not actually even in the firing order. It's, yeah, it was 1, 5, 3, 4, 2, 6 is sort of how they were in the plug. I don't know. Either way, they weren't in the plug in any sort of intuitive order or any order that really makes sense. So just goes to show, make sure you just trace them back from the injectors so that you know for sure that it's correct, which is what I've done here. So there's no knowing how many people have done that, doing RB30 looms for these things. There's probably a million of them out there that are batched incorrectly. It will still work if you batch them incorrectly. It doesn't massively matter. The reason that they're batched the way they are, for the firing order that they are, is so that the fuel spends as little time as possible in the combustion chamber so it doesn't atomize. So yeah, your firing order is 1, 5, 3, 6, 2, 4, so it makes sense to group them in 1, 5, 3, 6, 2 and 4, so that way they're firing right before they're building compression. So yeah, your fuel doesn't atomize in the combustion chamber. So will still work either way, but will run better if you have it batched properly. So yeah, that's done now. So pretty much all I'm going to do, as I was saying, this is the old 12 volt which used to supply all the injectors with constant power from the ECU. It runs through, it breaks out here into, from 1 it breaks out into 4. 3 of them go to 4, 5 and 6 injector plugs, and the other one keeps going through the room until about here, and it breaks out again into 3 for 1, 2 and 3. So my plan is to back here right before it breaks out initially, I'm going to splice in another power wire, another red one, and it's going to run up along the loom, along the firewall, and break out just near these earths, where it's going to go across to the fuse. That way, that is going to, so this is going to be my new 12 volt for the ECU, so I need to splice that in, and that way the ECU and the injectors are going to draw from that same fuse, and probably, yeah, the DEFI as well. So that's the next thing to do. Apart from that, it's just Spliced all my earths together, hook up an earth. I'm also going to, when I splice these together, I'll run another earth in the same splice, which I'll just run just out of the loom here, which I'll earth on the body somewhere near the ECU in the car. So just another body earth, plus I've got these 2 engine earths up here. And that should be plenty of earth for the system, and at that point the loom's more or less ready to go, so it's getting close. Sorry, this is a really long episode, guys, but it's just a really long, tedious job. And yeah, it's just nearly a whole... Yeah, it's been dragging on for like 3 weeks, but it's probably only been like 2 days work, but it's probably still another half a day in it. So here I've got my little splice, so that is going to be from the fuse, which is going to supply 12 volt to the ECU and the injectors. This is that rubber tape I was telling you about. Sort of sticks to itself when you stretch it out enough. I just thought I'd show you before I put 33 over the top of it. But yeah, that's what it looks like. So that insulates it nice and well, especially if it's somewhere where you didn't actually break the wires, so you can't get a heat shrink on it. So then this is my fuel pump relay activation. It's a negatively switched relay for the fuel pump, as I've said before. So I just had to use some wire from my old loom over there from the injectors, and I've just joined 2 of them together, and I've still got to lay them into the loom, but they're going to go to the fuel pump relay, which will be in the same position. So I've just got to lay these 2 into the loom. I've still got to fix up that CAS plug, which I will do now, and then I've just got to splice all of these earths together. So the CAS plug is all sorted. I've done that. It's at the end there. That's all done. Earthing's all sort of sorted, as you can see there. Everything's really earthed together, soldered up really well. So just earthed all that stuff and all that there. Also added this earth, which actually runs up to here. This was cut off. That actually runs to the earth near the injectors, which goes to a little pin which earths to the head, which got cut off for something anyway. So I decided to solder this sort of nice big earth wire to it, and then I ran it down and I collected both of the earths out of the ECU, which earth everything together. It's not really the prettiest there, but as you can see, collects them both. And then that is going to, I'm just going to put a terminal on the end of it, like a 10mm bolt crimp, and that's just going to earth to the body down in the footwell near the ECU there. So that way, hopefully, everything in this loom is going to be super well earthed. Hopefully it's going to be earthed really nicely. So pretty much all I'm going to do from here is tape up the ends of these, which are cut off, just because I don't know if any of them are positives or not. Just tape them up so that, you know, they don't potentially do anything silly. Tape up all these earth solders, and that's the loom ready to get laid in the car. I'm not going to go wrapping it all up until after startup. One thing I've learnt with cars is that usually 0 out of 10 times everything goes right, so you're always fault finding. So I'm not game to wrap the loom up. I've done a bit of wrapping and heat shrinking of a few connections and terminals, which I normally wouldn't, but I have anyway. But I'm definitely not game enough to go wrapping the whole loom up at this point, not until it's started and I know everything's working. So that's how it's going to pretty much stay. I'll just tape it up in a few places to tidy it up, and then it can get laid into the car. Loom's laid in the car. Everything's there. Everything reaches where it should, the way it should. Sort of sits nicely on top of the rail there, sort of down under the intake manifold out of the way a bit. Should look fine once it's all wrapped and actually taped up. Got my little breakouts here, which are going to be fine. I'll break them out a bit earlier so I can hide them up here on the firewall there. And yeah, so it's looking pretty good, I will say. Funny thing is, actually, when I was thinking about doing this loom was when I was sort of starting to get real busy with work, and I actually hit up Sam Whitey's Wiring. For those of you who don't know, he specialises in doing looms. He's in Brizzy, does amazing work, like really nice work, and sort of hit him up, and it was looking like I was going to be busy, and I was like, well, I'm going to have more money than I'm going to have time, so I might get him just to do my loom, and ended up getting quiet, and that's why I've decided to do it myself. And I tell you what, I really do wish I just got him to do it, because obviously I'm absolutely no expert as far as wiring goes, and still not even sure if this is going to work or not yet, so time will tell as to whether it actually starts up or not, if we have any issues. But yeah, it's just crap work. It's annoying. It's really long, painful. It's hard to get nice. It's hard to get tidy. It's hard to do it in a way that you actually like what you've done. Like looking at this pile of crap compared to what Whitey's wiring sort of does is, yeah, I don't even understand. But anyway, that's all I'm going to chuck in this episode. I'm pretty sure it's already going to be super long, so sorry for dragging it on, but yeah, that's pretty much the loom, all naked, but pretty much done. So yeah, that's probably what I'm going to do tonight. It's cold, it's late. And I might look at this thermos or whatever, but I'll start the next episode. But anyway, thanks for watching, as always, guys. It is getting closer. We are making progress. Obviously, I had to take this guard off to do all this, and I have to, the indicator wiring and whatever wiring's on the other side, I actually have to tuck it up the same way I did on my Crusader, to anyone who followed that build. Just because I can't run into guards because the car's too low, and if I do not get it out of the way, it's going to eat at all that wiring. The tire's going to grab it and it's going to eat it away. So it's another thing that I've got to do. But anyway, getting closer. Just got to sort out rad, thermos, finish the exhaust, build the intake cooling system, get it all hooked up. I have to sort out actually my alternator, because I'm running an RB25 alternator. I need to change the alternator plug on the loom, and I also need to, I'm pretty sure I need to change the charge fuse, because I'm pretty sure the RB25 alternator is more amps output. So do need to do that as well. So a little bit of stuff I've got to do, but it's all the pointy end of the stuff. It's all coming together, and hopefully it won't be too long before we can start it up. Cheers guys, catch you later.